So, welcome to Start Fresh, how to shift to success without the stress. I know we all want less stress in our lives. I don't know anyone who wants more. Life is changing pretty fast. I mean, really faster than ever. It's definitely different than in the good olden days when we moved at a slower pace and people sat on the front porch and just rocked and hung out. Life isn't really like that anymore. And if we don't make changes to keep up, we're going to get left in the dust. Inertia won't allow you to maximize your potential or get where you want to be. You really have to do something to make that happen these days. I kind of get a chuckle out of the phrase, don't change that dial, because there really are no dials on TVs anymore. And if you don't have the technical skills or the knowledge you need to keep up at work, you're going to get left behind. So those are a few examples. We're always having to progress or we're going to get left behind. And that's not a good feeling. So your ability to intentionally adapt and start fresh and actively move forward in your life and work makes all the difference. Makes a really powerful difference. So to operate out of your full potential, all that you're capable of personally and professionally, you have to do something different. It isn't something that's going to, happen by chance. So maybe change isn't really even on your radar. You might even be quite comfortable or content with your life as it is right now and where it's taking you. But if you want to make a difference or operate out of your full potential or reach goals, it makes sense to develop the skill to start fresh. Because if you keep doing what you have been doing, you're going to suddenly find yourself left behind, or even worse, stuck. So perhaps you're somebody who is addicted to safe, like risk. You're kind of risk adverse or resistant to change. And I'll be the first to admit, I wasn't always a fan of change. I was someone who kind of liked to do something one way and do it that way for the rest of my life. But really, those days are over. We can't really get away with that. We have to keep changing and adapting to keep up. Or maybe you're an earlier adapter. You're someone who jumps on the next, latest, greatest version of an iPhone or something else, and you are ready for it. To try new stuff personally and professionally, but maybe you're not making the changes or adapting in the ways that are really going to serve you best. Or maybe you're somebody who starts out all gangbusters when it comes to change, but then you fizzle out as things inevitably get discouraging or frustrating. You run up against obstacles and it gets hard. Or maybe you are all about new. In fact, you regularly chase the next shiny object, but rarely pull it all together so you can achieve anything of substance, kind of all over the place. Are you living in the past, kind of stuck? Are good reasons to start fresh. So I have a question for you. What keeps you from intentionally moving forward and expanding your possibilities? Making those kinds of changes it's not that easy. It can be challenging. So we all have little things in us that kind of keep us from making certain changes that would actually do good things for us. I want to share this theory with you, the angle theory. And let's assume you're right here. So if you're right here, that's kind of only a hair off of your full potential, right? Or maybe you're way over here and you're ways from your full potential. But as time goes on, that gap grows. It doesn't run parallel up like this. No, it actually goes out this direction. So if you are just a hair off, it's eventually going to be a pretty big gap. Or if you already have a big gap, it's going to get even bigger like this. So this all becomes the gap of where we are and where we need to be. So that's why we need fresh starts, because you have to consistently be changing in order to keep up. And fresh starts are pretty amazing. They're actually an opportunity to realign your life so that you're not wobbling and veering off to sides that are, going to leave you in a ditch. No one wants to do that. So you can make a choice to realign and engage in actions that will maximize your potential and reach your desired goals. So now I have a few provocative questions for you. Some questions I really want you to think about. So just want to check back in with the chat screen. So some things that keep people from moving forward are fear of failure, fear and inertia. Yes, those are totally normal things that keep us back. Even those who you might look at and think, wow, that person's really confident, they don't have any fears. Trust me, everyone has fears. So you're not alone in that. So the first question I want to ask you is, what do you really want? That kind of feels like a big and dangerous question, but we often don't really consider what we really want. Sometimes we pursue things because we think that's what's expected of us, or that's what we should do, but really tapping into what do we really, really want. And if you really, really want something, it's going to be far more compelling. And oftentimes what we really, really want personally is at odds with what we want professionally. It's really important to bring those together so they actually complement each other and aren't fighting against each other. The second question I want you to think about is, what's your target? Or you might think of it in terms of what's your intention or your goal or your purpose, however you word it. What is it? What's the big thing you're chasing? But if you don't know what you're trying to do or where you're trying to go, it's pretty hard to get there. And it's next to impossible to know how to invest your time and energy if you don't know where you're trying to go. It's also very tough to know what your priorities are. So establishing what your target is super important. And the last provocative question I have for you is, what's success for you? What is your definition? We actually all have a very different definition if we really choose to think it through. It isn't just making, millions or being famous or something along those lines. There are many ways to define success, and it's actually kind of individual. Knowing what it is that you define success by is really helpful as far as directing you as you seek to reach your target. So my definition of success is, how in step am I with God? In other words, am I successfully following through with what He's leading me to do and be? If I'm doing that, then it's a success. And sometimes that causes me to take some big risks that don't make sense to other people. Or sometimes it might be that what doesn't seem all that successful to others is total success to me. So Alicia's sharing her definition of success is absence of failure by the world standards. So yes, we all have really different definitions. So it's really important to pinpoint what that is. Now, the problem is there's probably a gap between where you are and where you want to be. When I first thought about becoming a coach, for example, there were many steps I had to take to close the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. So steps like finding the right coach training school, completing the training, getting certified, completing ICF certification process, which was lengthy, getting other certifications, and building a business. And so there's a whole lot of action steps you could place under each one of those items. So it can kind of feel complicated or overwhelming to some people. Some parts of closing the gap were tasks like I've mentioned, but some parts were areas that I needed to grow, or mindsets that I had to change, or habits and skills that I needed to learn in order for me to get where I wanted to be. And honestly, I'm not finished yet. I still have additional goals, additional certifications I'd like to get. So I've not arrived. That's an ongoing process for me. So I can tell you, I have failed a whole lot along the way, and I've learned a ton. But it's been really important to know how to start fresh and begin again. And really, there's absolutely no shame in that. In fact, did you know that Steven Spielberg was rejected twice by the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts? We would think of him as a raging success, but he had trouble getting going. Dr. Seuss, aka Theodore Seuss Geisel, had his first book rejected by 27 different publishers. And before Beyonce was part of Destiny's Child, or dazzling us with her successful recording career, she was in Girls' Time. And if you don't remember that, because I definitely didn't, it was a 6-member group that was on Star Search, and they lost. So at 9 years old, she was shattered, kind of a failure at that point. And the group continued to progress and struggled for 7 years. And then they made some major changes. So I consider that they made a fresh start. And they reduced the group to 4 and changed the name to Destiny's Child. And that's, inspiration to reimagine and make some significant changes. So onward to Colonel Harlan Sanders. He didn't get his start as a child. He worked odd jobs for years. And when he was 40, he opened a restaurant in an old gas station. And later, he wanted to franchise that restaurant and was rejected by 1,009 restaurants before getting a taker. And that's what led to what we now call Kentucky Fried Chicken. Vera Wang was a competitive ice skier. Tell you the truth, I really didn't even know that about her. And she decided to quit and felt like a failure because she made that choice. And mostly because that was really all she knew. But today, obviously, she is a successful fashion designer. So that's a big switch for her, where she's had to start fresh. There are women like Lisa Turquoise, who founded Proverbs 31 Ministry. She kind of looked like she had it all together when her husband had an affair, and she learned that she had breast cancer at the same time. So that's pretty disappointing and can feel like a failure. But really, it was all part of a process and things that God can redeem. He can change things for the better. And those are things that are opportunities for fresh starts. So finally, J.K. Rowling was on welfare, depressed, and a divorced single mother struggling while simultaneously writing novels. And now she is one of the richest women in the world. And I love this quote. It's impossible to live without failing at something unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default. And that is so, so true. I think it really sums it up. Can you imagine how many times each of the above individuals had to start fresh to succeed and meet their goals? It's hard to really fathom. If you add them all up, it's probably a couple thousand. The beauty of starting fresh is that you can do it now. Sometimes we kind of think, we only make fresh starts at the beginning of the year, when that's what time it is now. However, you can make a fresh start at the beginning of a year, at the beginning of a quarter, beginning of a month, week, day, hour, minute, right now. There's always an opportunity to start fresh. And that's pretty encouraging to me.